Welcome back to NAB Show Live 2015. I'm Lindsay, and we have a panel here to talk a little bit about live streaming, what we're seeing as trends and so on and so forth. Right to my right here, we have Ken Zamkow from LiveU. Hey, yep. Ken. Over here we have Chris Bell from, it's TVU, is that right?
TVU Networks.
TVU Networks, and Philip Nelson from NewTek. So I guess the thing to look at really is, what are we seeing? Well, first of all, before we get into that, let's just talk about what every angle is, what you guys actually do. So from my perspective, Pixcore does 200 or 300 live events a year. We, from all over the world, we transmit them with some of your tools. We put a lot of that stuff together. So that's what we see. LiveU, what do you produce? Or what do you provide?
So we basically created the space of cellular bonding. So we take a number of cell phone connections and other data networks together to transmit very high quality video from anywhere without needing satellite trucks, without needing fiber connections and so on. So basically just a way to easily transmit live from anywhere.
TVU?
So TVU are also very much in the acquisition business, acquisition of content from a hostile environment. We use a different technology to LiveU to do it, but it's still heavily cellular based. But what we're really good at is getting high quality, low latency video back from pretty much any environment we can operate in. Having got that back, the next stage of the process is content distribution, and then getting it out to either the partner stations, the affiliates, or out to the web in stream format.
Fantastic. And NewTek?
All right, well, NewTek makes the NewTek TriCaster, which is a live TV truck in a box. Basically takes the power you'd find in the 18-wheeler and shrinks it down into a tabletop box and allows you to broadcast to three things at once, to television, to web, and to video screens. And we also have a new device called the Talk Show, which is a broadcast interface for Skype, and it was just awarded Best of Show by TV Technology.
Fantastic. So what are we seeing, like from a variety of our clients, what are we seeing as trends in live streaming? What kind of live streaming? So, of course, broadcasters have been live streaming in some way, shape, or form for quite some time. But when we talk about going to IP, whether it's YouTube or many of those other networks, what are we seeing as trends? So what do you see happening now that might be distinct from what might have been a couple years ago?
Well, one of the things that I think is very interesting is the trend of companies like CBS to go direct to customer with subscriptions. Right. You have people that are unplugging from cable and they still want this content and they're willing to pay for it. And you have like CBS, I think it's called CBSN, right, the 24/7 live news channel on your Roku. You can subscribe to your local CBS channel, I think for $6 a month.
And I think HBO has now done that too.
HBO,
it's cut the cord.
And then you have companies like Vice.com who are really delivering news in a different way that targets millennials who rarely turn on the TV. They're going directly to online, and then you see Vice signing the deal with HBO to provide them with news, and so they're going into broadcast television. It really is kind of the wild, wild west.
It does feel like that. I mean, I think that one of the things that we're seeing is that we're really getting to a point where almost anybody can do this, or really anybody can do it. Whether they should or not is a whole other thing. Yep. But between things as simple as a Hangout on Air or a Meerkat or a variety of other technologies, I mean, anybody can now stream. But one of the things I think is interesting when you look at Vice is the idea that it's not so much that anybody can stream. I think that's interesting, but I think that what's interesting is that any brand can stream.
Right.
When they have a little bit of money, when they have a little bit to add to that, they're able to now build a network around their own brand. How they do that, I think, is important. I think one of the things that we see is brands trying to just use it as a big commercial aren't as successful at viewership. But with a lot of the technologies, transmission being able, it used to be a sat truck. To get that stuff, and now it is there's a whole variety of IP solutions to back all those things. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing with your clients that of how they're using web streaming in general?
Yes, so I think we see a number of different levels of utilization of video. So we're basically, all of us, I think, are in the professional uplink or professional video space. So of course, we see a lot of that, so broadcasters creating a lot more content and distributing it through many more platforms and so on. But what we also see is that broadcasters are starting to leverage more user-generated content. Right. So they're starting to deploy apps and things with their viewers, basically, to start getting content. So that's one trend that we're seeing.
Well, and one of the things I think is interesting about that is that when someone comes to us to do a live stream for them, we basically tell them there are 3 reasons to do a live stream. One reason is that you have breaking news. Now that breaking news might be the release of your new product, but it's breaking news. Sports, because no one wants to know the score later, and live interaction. If you're not going to interact with your audience, then there's don't go down that path. I mean, live is still, to do it, especially as a brand where your brand is at risk. Live becomes more complicated. So those are, that audience interaction I think becomes important.
Yeah, and you mentioned sports. So sports is also something that's very big right now. We see more and more sports programming created daily, basically. So. You see a lot of streaming of high school games, of more college games.
I was about to say, it's gone down to, it was pro football is one thing, and then we got to college, and now it's like every high school game out there.
Yeah, and a lot of behind-the-scenes content. So professional teams will stream a lot of their press conferences and a lot of things like player arrivals. They'll stream snaps from practice and so on. So sports programming is basically exploding right now.
What are you seeing with your clients?
Very much the same thing, but one of the more interesting trends is I'm seeing a whole bunch of technologies all coming of age at the same time. So we're on the 5th generation now of the TV pack and the acquisition products. We've got the drone technology, which is all coming of age right now. We've got the expectations of the higher end streamers that but dropping a stream isn't acceptable anymore. Dropping frames is barely acceptable. A meg, I mean, there's plenty of people who want 2, 3 meg, high definition. So one of the more fascinating trends is the good stuff all comes together. So we've got little sports teams doing high school sports or kids soccer games or whatever it may be. But we've also got people like the Dji Drone Launch that occurred last week. So we had the Phantom 3, and they were literally they flew it out the hallway of a hotel in Singapore, and out the door it went into space, looking down over the city, and it was absolutely astonishing. And so to be able to get that video, and then to be able to backhaul it, and then to get it into the launch event itself in HD, and then to get it out to everybody during the launch event, I mean, there was very little tolerance for anything going wrong there. And it's a different world.
And I think that is one of the things that a lot of video producers have a hard time with web streaming. And I think that what's interesting that what we find is that both broadcasters and the video, people just getting into live streaming, both have problems with it. Broadcasters are used to rock solid, millions of dollars behind every connection. There's not, you're not worried about whether things are going to stay connected or not. People just getting into the industry, a lot of them are we see a lot of very talented filmmakers, for instance, that are going to get into that, and then they suddenly realize that live is a lot harder. Because, once you get behind it, like once it's not working, it's very hard to catch back up again. Where do you see, when something goes wrong, in a live stream, where do you see it happen?
One of the biggest problems that we see is just people that don't do their due diligence in checking their bandwidth and testing the connection. I'm not going to mention the company, but we were doing a big press event, or they were doing a big webcast press event, and they came in the night before, checked their network connection, test looked good. The next morning at 9 o'clock during the webcast, everyone in this large company comes in and starts checking email at 9 a.m., and the webcast came to a grinding halt. And it's the little things like that that are not hard to solve, but you got to think through it. You know.
Well, and a lot of the stuff that when we're putting these things together, a lot of our issues are we're asking, do you have a separate VLAN? Yeah. I want my bandwidth, if I'm going to get it terrestrially, I want my bandwidth to be separated from everything else. Right. I want to know that I've got a separate connection. I'm going to use, and then typically I want to come out of that location in multiple ways. So for us, on a large event, we follow a PACE model. It's a SEAL term for primary, alternative, contingency, emergency. I want 4 ways out. you know, for a large event, and so cellular is usually one of those ways out.
Absolutely.
And I want it to be different. I don't want it to be another internet connection. I want to have a wired connection.
You don't want two cords from the same hub? I'm just kidding.
No.
This is my primary, this is my backup. They just plug them right into the same hub.
They'll tell me I'm giving you 2 internet lines, and I'll be like, so what's the diversity out of the building? And they're like, there's like, like I don't, you know, like I don't really know, you know. So
well, we have a D-Link router in the closet, and they're both plugged into it.
Which helps sometimes with forklifts. But anyway, but I think that I think that those backhauls become really, really important. You know, we. You know, for us, we typically have, you know, a KA minimum uplink, you know, mixed with cellular connection, and then we still want the line there. Mm-hmm. You know, but that is, I think that the connection becomes the thing that people aren't.
You know, one of the great things about where we are today is, I think everybody has kind of alluded to or said, there's a democratization of technology and ability.
Right.
Anybody has the tools at their fingertips to make a show, you know, and so it really becomes, you know, how good of a storyteller are you, and how good is the idea, and you know, because anybody can make it, and you know, if you have a good idea and it finds an audience, you can create something almost out of nothing these days.
Right.
And so, you know, may the best man win. Really, you know, the gatekeepers are gone.
It is, and I think that the challenge again is what happens. I think a lot of times people kind of survive up to a certain point, and then they make a big mistake on a big event, and then that's the end of the company.
Yeah, and I think the distinction is important here between large pre-scheduled events like doing a show out of NAB and so on, and things that are more ongoing, like daily news or ongoing sports and so on, where you kind of do it day in, day out, and in those cases, actually, you don't always have that those 4 layers or 4 levels of redundancy, and we actually see. So thankfully, you know, we've been doing this for a while in the cellular space, and we've actually seen that the quality that you can get now with cell phone networks has dramatically improved over the past few years, and you know, our technology has improved. You know, we have smaller devices and so on. But generally, I would say that if broadcasters used to treat cellular bonding as a sort of novelty thing, or something you would use if you didn't have any other choice because you had to move around or you couldn't get a satellite truck in time, now you show up to a breaking news event and you'll see more backpacks than trucks, basically.
Now, and a question about that for both of you. I mean, one of the things that obviously we've experienced with cellular bonding is, you know, press events, you know, saturate the area, you know, can saturate the area. How do you guys work around that?
There's two primary ways of handling it. One is the technology's just getting better and better. Mm-hmm. So the mathematics involved is difficult. The reason there's only a couple of players in the space who actually do well. On a good day, there's plenty of people who can do it. On a rough day, there's only a couple. And so you need the tech to do it, and it's all getting smaller. Our new product, it's 20% of the size of the old one. All the power, 20% of the size. But the tech that's in there, the ability to move packets fast and hard and reliably. So recently coming out of the Super Bowl, so the press events of the Super Bowl, lockdown type, very hard to get additional bandwidth. But the packs were there and the packs held up well. So that's one approach. But the other one is, and Ken knows this because we've been through similar things like Sochi and the Olympics. There are some big events you just have to pre-plan. And these streams and these newscasts, when you get to that level, they're professional events and failure is not an option. Right. So we can lay on supplemental bandwidth. The systems will handle KA band, we'll handle cellular, we'll handle Wi-Fi, I'll take 2 cups and a piece of string. If packets move up and down it, we're going to do video. Yeah. And that kind of resilience is required now for the bigger events.
Yep. And then we also work with antennas, so we try to create antennas that have stronger signal than you would get on a typical cell phone, and they're multi-directional, so that even if your typical device might not get connectivity, we can still overcome that noise and that crowd by having a stronger antenna. Right. And back to Chris's point about large sporting events, so again, I think we've gone a tremendous way over the past few years where at this Super Bowl in Arizona, we actually set up a couple of hotspots for our customers just in case, because you know, as Chris mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we had some redundancy. but the LTE networks there were so good that our customers never actually ended up using them.
And now a lot of times right now, a lot of the cell providers for those big events don't want to be the one cell provider that no one could use, and so they're bringing in repeaters, they're bringing in, they don't want to be that, they don't want to be that company. So, and I think that, and to back up, I mean, I think that a lot of times people need to understand when they're getting into live streaming all the different options that they have. So you have, for me, fiber is kind of for a lot of the venues that we work in, fiber is something that we're going to get, so it's going to be something like the Switch or Vivix, is going to be our one-way out. And then you have your C-band, KU, KA, C-band being the most expensive but most stable, uplink, from as far as that goes. KU being the most common, and KA being great because it's just data. You're not thinking about, for those watching, you're not thinking about when you're doing a KA, you're not thinking about the other side. You're just thinking, I'm just going to go up, and I get bandwidth out of it. With KU, of course, I got to be coming down somewhere, to make that work. And then, of course, there's the cellular backups that are all there, and we typically are using a little bit of all of them. When it comes down to video production, where do we, beyond the bandwidth, beyond the connection, where do you see a lot of your clients having trouble?
Having trouble? I think one thing that is a concern for a lot of people is just cameras and camera placement. As people get into live broadcasting, because one of our goals when we developed TriCaster was to bring new people into live broadcasting. If I sold a TriCaster to every television station in America, that's 3,000 or so, but we want, there are 500,000 churches doing, video, and there's schools, and there's people with ideas. And a lot of the challenge that I see there is people just not having the experience. Right. As you bring all these new people in, they don't know where the prime positions are to shoot a high school basketball game. Right. They don't know where to put your cameras for a football game or a baseball game. And so that's one of it's not really a technology issue or how to effectively light. All these little things that bring that polish of a professional production into your project, are things you got to learn somewhere.
Well, and I think that and it does. I mean, that is some. I look back on the early ones that we did, and
you're like, did I light that?
Pretty rough. But I think that one of the things there is that some of it just comes from experience. Yeah. I think that one of the things that we find interesting now in the larger venues that we're working in, larger events, that a lot of our events are starting to contract in physical size. So our clients are going from the 2,000 or 3,000 people in the room, and this is for corporate events. They're kind of pulling that number down, and because they know that they're getting more in the online. Right. So in the past we had, there were 3,000 people in the room, or in some cases 15,000 people in the room, and there were 300 watching the live stream. We lived through a lot of years of 300 people watching. And now we're seeing 15,000 in the room, 70,000 online, or 3,000 in the room and 20,000 online. And as that happens, one of the things is a lot of the physical requirements that we had about you can't put the camera there, go away, because the bigger audience is now slowly becoming the online audience rather than the physical audience. And I think that's going to be a really interesting process.
One of the trends we've seen here on the show floor is more and more corporate PR groups are coming on through. I mean, the professional broadcasters get it. 4 years ago, I was standing here trying to convince them this technology actually worked. It did, but they didn't believe it. Now it's well established, it's an industry standard, but now the corporate guys are doing the same thing. So the CEO's giving his weekly brief. There may be 20 people in the room with him, but there's 50,000 other employees who better be tuned into that stream. and again, these are multi-camera sophisticated productions, but purely for streaming. So there may be a multi-camera shoot running into a TriCaster, firing it out, but they've got a couple of packs roving around. Yeah. So they get angles and things. So the guy walks across the courtyard or down the hallway, and they're trying to add these extra elements to jazz it up a little.
And we're dealing with quite a few operations where we're asked to bring in a variety of locations within a country, within a city, or across a continent, across other countries. Where all of those, you want all those feeds to be coming in real time, and it used to be something that was a ABC, CNN kind of thing, and now it's a Acme Manufacturing. That is doing that because they are they're multinationals. They have all of these exposures. There's do you see any specific popularity as far as CDNs, where your clients are actually sending a lot of their content?
We see a variety. I mean, there's a lot. I don't know if I should mention any names, but there's a lot of platforms
that's
out
where,
there.
I mean, I'll mention names, but yeah. I mean, it's so.
Yeah, there's so much choice out there that really we see almost every CDN out there and every live streaming platform that that people are using. But maybe to go back to one of the challenges that you asked about earlier. So. We also see a lot of corporate events and things like that for training, for keynotes, and so on. But our bread and butter is still the broadcast world. And in the broadcast world, I think the main challenge is that there's a generational shift and there's a complete change in language. So if until now, broadcast engineers needed to know things like SDI and megahertz and baseband and things like that. Now they need to understand megabits per second and IP and so on. So that change in language, not everybody within those organizations kind of knows both these worlds. So this is one of I think the key challenges of kind of making that transition on the one hand, and then on the other hand, when you recruit somebody who's younger, still having to use all these more traditional things which are still going to stay in the broadcast facility for a number of years. So that's, I think, the challenge.
And I think that is one of the challenges that we have, is bringing on, for our events, bringing on people that can span that gap when they're standing on site. Sometimes sometimes we're doing all of the cameras, all the switching, everything else, and sometimes we're just doing the transmission. But either way, you need to have people there that are going to understand bit rate, but also be able to talk about balanced audio and be able to, and everything in between, of being able to talk to everyone about, this is why I'm not getting the signal that I want. I think one thing that live streaming, a lot of live streaming companies, I think, have a challenge with is they're used to being the caboose. They were the little thing that, there's a whole big event going on and we'll give you some video. Make that work, and put it on the web. And they are not used to, for better or worse, we're kind of known as a little bit of a bully when you put us on set, because I get measured by what's on the web. I don't get measured by how hard I was, backstream. And so there's a lot of conversations that have to get, you have to defend your turf in a lot of ways. If you're getting buzz in your line, if you're getting, that's my pet peeve is buzz in your line and audio sync. So there's this thing. If you're getting into live streaming, there's a thing called audio sync. Your video is coming slower than your audio, and if you don't get it right, everything's off sync. Anyway, sorry. I just had to slow down and say that.
Unless you're a fan of Godzilla movies.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but being able to kind of push for those things as a webcaster and understand that's something that you have to get.
Yeah. The languages are different. I mean, webcasting and streaming is an IT operation.
To some degree.
It depends. I mean, at a lower level, it's a consumer or prosumer in its bits and its packets and its USB and it's
the actual stream. But
the language of it, it's IP addresses and ports and bit rates and latencies.
Right.
And that's a new and very different world to the traditional broadcast.
And the problem, though, is if you bring only people to an event that know those things, you're not going to get a good event.
It's going to look terrible because it's not properly lit. The cameras aren't white balance.
And there's buzz and there's audio sync, but the bits all work.
Yeah, and you're right.
What goes into the bits
our bit rate was amazing, but the show was terrible.
Yeah, it was a 4K stream, with no lights.
It's where these two worlds overlap: the broadcast professionals and the IT guys. Right. And you're right. The ones who are most successful can speak both languages because it's not easy. I can't white balance the camera. Right. I can figure out the other bit, but my shot is going to look terrible.
Right.
I can press the button, but I don't really know how to do it. I have no business doing it. It's not my skill set.
Answering your question from earlier about where we're seeing people stream to, YouTube is a very popular destination. Mm-hmm. People want to try to go to a CDN or a host where they think they may help them bring an audience. There's the white label type CDNs don't give you an audience. They give you premium service, premium support, but you bring your own audience. And so people like MTV and the NBA Development League, they're going to an Akamai or one of those tier ones. And then, the NBA Development League at the same time also publishes to YouTube. and you can watch the Development League games live on YouTube. And then of course Ustream has been, one that I've seen a ton of people work with over the years.
Right.
And then another one that's really coming on strong is Microsoft Azure. Mm-hmm. You have so many enterprise clients that are now becoming broadcasters. And so, as you mentioned, companies, when they start getting into streaming, they're like, who should own this? Is it marketing? Is it corporate communications? Is it IT? And, it's different in every company. But, with Microsoft's, influence in enterprise, I really have eyes on Azure to open up some big things.
And I have to admit, I haven't seen any of it yet. I mean, like from Azure, we know some guys that are using it. Mm-hmm. The platforms that we've seen for very different reasons. YouTube is a very popular platform.
Yep.
It's got a couple issues. One is if your parent company is in Germany, it's not a good one because YouTube can't stream live to Germany.
Really?
Contractual issue. So, and you'd be surprised how often you run into that. Like we keep on running into these companies, they're like, well, why isn't it showing up in Germany? I'm like, oh, it doesn't work in Germany. I was like, oh, right, their parent company. I'm working with some company in the US, their parent company is somewhere else. So other restrictions that really, that are problematic for people in YouTube, of course, is advertising. So if you're going to put logos up there, if you're going to run ads, that's against the EULA.
Yeah.
So people get away with it most of the time, but maybe not forever. So
right.
It's definitely against the it's verboten.
And that's just a recent development too.
It's not that recent. It's just
really?
No, it's just been promoted recently.
It's just been promoted and publicized.
Yeah. It's just been people talked about it recently because I think they've
nicked
a couple people. Well, and they've nicked a couple people, I think. But it's been around for a long time.
Okay.
That hasn't been even before. Well, to date my streaming, there was a time with YouTube where it was all just partners. So you're already a big advertising partner. This wasn't an issue. It was only an issue when it became free to everyone. The Ustream, we see a lot of people as the alternative to that. I think that the hard part is if you want all the, Ustream comes across as very inexpensive, except for when you want all the tools that they provide, then you're looking at enterprise, and it gets a lot more expensive. It turns into real money. As a manufacturer, now, of course, Akamai, Bright Cove, those are all ones that we see in the, as a tier 1 back end. I think that one of the challenges for companies is also secure and bandwidth conscious, streams. So Ustream now has I think it's called Align, which is their private streaming. So two-point part of authentication to make sure that people can watch the stream. Mm-hmm. Kontiki has kind of run that business for a long time. So they have two things. One is they're very secure, but then they're also they use peer-to-peer once they hit the building. So they get into the building, and so it's like multicast. Once you get into the building, everybody's getting it, and you're only getting a small, a fraction of what it was. And for a big company like AT&T or someone like that has thousands of people in a building, even a gig connection isn't fast enough to solve that problem. So we see all of them. It's not. I think a lot of people ask us about CDNs, but I think that everybody, each one of them is their own little tool that has their own little needs. Where do you see live streaming going?
Maybe I'll talk about another challenge of live streaming,
sure.
and where I think things should be going. So I think like we spoke about, a lot of people are starting to stream now because the tools are available, because it's so much easier, but they still don't have all the experience in terms of marketing and promotion that the TV networks have. So it's great to have a live stream, but if nobody knows about it, then where's the real value? And this is something that I think people are still figuring out. And some of these things are very basic, like, tweet it in advance, like a few days before, and then 15 minutes before you go live, tweet it again, and then when you go live,
and if you have stars on your show, like set it up so that they have the tweet pre-written, all set up. Like all you got to do is do this 2 minutes before you go on. And I'm always surprised at how many people bring A-level stars onto something, and sometimes it's a contractual issue. But a lot of times they would have, but they don't. You can't have them figure out what to talk about.
Yeah, and sometimes also having a schedule. If you're at a big event and you don't publish a schedule so people know when to tune in, then again, people are not going to watch for 8 hours straight or 10 hours or things like that. So being able to publish a schedule, or if you take a break, also notifying people, hey, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in whatever 15, 30 minutes, an hour. And I think all these things help build an audience that that can help with a lot of online productions. So.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things just to note on that was we're real big fans of countdown clocks. If we know we're going to start on a certain time, we make a lot of them. They're very, we practically got a full
King
design
of the countdown clock.
Because we
we
brand them. They've got all the, the logos are all in there, and they're in the right fonts and all the other stuff. But why we spend so much time on them is it's really important for the audience to know. And if someone's running late, we slide the clock. So it goes from, it's at 30 seconds and now it's at 5 minutes. But we've kept that relationship with to make sure that people know it's still coming up, that we're paying attention to that. I think that becomes important.
And I think NFL teams, a lot of NFL teams are doing it right now when they push alerts to you when they're about to start. So if the coach has a press conference or something like that, you'll get an alert that says, hey, watch the live stream at 10 a.m. or at 1 p.m. and so on. So that also, I think, helps a lot if you have your own dedicated app.
Also, extra content before the show. So if you're scheduled at 10, 9:30, you pop on a bunch of videos that they're going to go there. The White House is really good at this. They'll run like an hour and a half of videos before the State of the Union, and they're clipping at 150,000 viewers by the time they hit start. I think a lot of times, anytime we look at a graph on a CDN that goes like this, starts slow and goes, I was like, great show, bad promotion. Right. Because the people weren't leaving, they were all coming, they're all going, hey, this is available.
Yeah. It reminds me of a problem that, you asked about problems when people are doing live streaming. It's they don't start the stream early enough.
Right.
You do have to give your audience time to settle in and share it with their friends and remind people to.
Well, and the other secret is that's not just giving the audience a time; it's giving your production team. So what we do is we throw that up there, and now we're doing signal test. We want to have music, or we want to do playback, everything else. What we love is someone to get up there and announce something that we're going to show from the stage for a second. I mean, when we can get away with it. Now. For the audience, that's you're live and we're saying hi, but for us, that's going, yes, mics work,
everything works.
Sync works. Before the main event, before Hillary Clinton walks out on stage, we'd like to really know that those mics are working. That kind of, because you never trust it. You're always afraid somebody changed something 2 hours before the event until you get there.
Do you have a rule of thumb about how early you try to start your streams?
Minimum 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
That's our minimum. We sometimes start them as much as an hour before. Some of our limitations depend on the CDN. So for instance, on YouTube, you can't clip after 2 hours. So if someone tells us we have an hour and a half event, we're not going to run more than 15 or 20 minutes before the event. Now, there are reasons we don't run live before that for a variety of creative, that our clients have. But if they ask us, 20 to 30 minutes is what we want to do, usually put it up. And then what we do is we split that into a separate switcher oftentimes that's downstream that cuts off the entire production crew. So we can run our playback and everything else. It's not touching, and no one can accidentally go live. But that's just a soft router to kind of move things through.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the fun things I've seen coming out of this show is I've met a number of people who are actually successfully monetizing very small events. So I found it's basically it's streamcasting kids ice hockey games in Sweden. and he said, I do 2,500 of these events a year, and I get an average of 30 viewers.
30?
30.
But
you know what? It's the parents. And you've got a choice between watching the game or your kid. You may have some loyalty to the team, but you've got absolute devotion to your kid.
You already got my gears rolling.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Dad's on the road, but you know what? Dad saw him play. And it's like, you've just taken this tiny little portable kit of a couple of $1,000s worth of stuff that you mail to people. And they set it up, and they're giving online production advice to the guys doing the streaming, like pan it up, pan it down, just the very basics to get them going. And 20 or 30 people get to subscribe to watch their kids play. It's awesome. Like, well done. That's to me, it's an outstanding use of the technology. It's not super high tech, but very effective. Serves the market, actually makes somebody some money. Yep. I mean, it's win-win-win. You simply can't do it until the technology just gets cheap enough and efficient enough. And again, we got the bandwidth, we got the encoding, The semi-professional equipment is now pretty good and reasonably priced.
I got really excited about the little Black Magic cameras. I don't know if you saw those tiny little SDI, these tiny little cameras. I was like, I can put like 8 cameras in a 1510, and I'll be off to the races. Like just stick these little cameras, I put little pan tilt zooms on them, and I'll be set.
Those micro-sized cameras are just, the quality is just ridiculous these days. I mean, there was a time when you really had to have some bulky gear, and we were helping a project down at South by Southwest, and they had some HDS or component HD cameras and one GoPro, and that GoPro looked better than the bigger, bulkier cameras, and it was $500 camera or less.
Right.
You know, really, there's no excuse not to get your content on the web anymore.
Right.
You know, an area where we've seen insane growth, and we've all benefited from this, is sports.
Right.
But it's not your tier 1 sports like football and big basketball. You know, it's schools trying to get all their Olympic sports online. You know, they use it for recruiting. You know, it's just the recruiting side of the streaming is as important as the fan engagement, because if you're trying to recruit one of the top volleyball players in the country, and you know, you're trying to get them to move away from their family, if you can, as a recruiting tool, say your grandmother will be able to watch every one of your games online, you know, it opens up doors. I mean, they may have hundreds of people watching, and you know, not thousands, but you know, it's a marketing tool for the colleges. You know, there other areas of massive growth, or you know, enterprise is growing like mad, as you well know.
That's been,
you know,
it's been kind of our bread and butter for a long time.
Budgets get cut. They're not going to fly in 3,000 people. As you said, they fly in 300, and then they all stay home.
Well, and we did an event for one company recently that was doing a big overhaul in how they communicate to the rest of the world, and they have 50 different locations.
All right.
And so what we did is we did a stream where all their VPs and everything else that wanted to talk are just in a conference room by themselves. There's nobody in the room.
Really?
And they, you know, because they used to, every time they did that, they used to bring everybody in every year or every 2 years or whatever they bring it in. It was a lot of money. And instead, they had us do it, and we built up a bunch of stuff so they could draw and do, you know, talk about things and run PowerPoints and everything else. But then people could still raise their hand and ask questions remotely, you know, back into it. But it was, but we definitely felt like when we were doing it, we were kind of seeing a little bit of the future.
Right.
You know, it's much easier to distribute. You know, there's not. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, why is there a physical audience here at all? You know, there are reasons to do it, networking and shaking hands.
It's like a comedian with no audience. It's not as good of a show, maybe.
Maybe.
You know?
Sometimes. But
you got to have that energy of the crowd, but you're not going to have 3,000. You have a 10%.
Like, what do you need to get that to get energy? And when you watch the rehearsals, I have to admit, you know, I think maybe they think that there's energy, but there's a lot of companies we work with that are doing, you know, for a large event, they're doing 2 or 3 days of rehearsal. And those guys are doing that thing over and over and over again. You know, they're changing the slide by 2 pixels, and they're doing it again, and they're, you know, moving things around, and then they're changing one word and doing it again. I don't think that they can still do all of that. The question is, do they need, you know, 15,000 people in the room to justify? You know, is it going to be any different? I don't know. And the thing is that once I get rid of that audience, not that it's self-serving, but once I get rid of that audience, now I'm in a situation where I can now put my cameras in a lot of different places.
That's cool.
Anyway, so I think it's kind of a good overview. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this little live stream. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching NAB Live 2015.